What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be a little bit of a different video for you guys. I'm going to be doing a ranking video. Yes, I know I haven't done one of these in a while, but every time I do one, you guys seem to enjoy it. So I thought I would quickly film another one. And today I'm going to be ranking the 2019 MCU movies. As you guys know, I love the MCU. I am a diehard fan of the MCU. I love all these movies. Okay, I love them all. But there are some more than others that I just love more. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. So before we get started, if this is your first ever video on my channel, hit that subscribe button. I seriously appreciate every single one of you guys. And comment down below what you guys like about all three of these movies and how you would rank them. I would love to talk about that with you guys. So now let's get started on the ranking. Coming in at number 3 should be no surprise to any of you guys, and that would be Captain Marvel. Now, is Captain Marvel a bad film? No, not at all. I know a lot of people hate this movie. I personally don't hate this movie whatsoever. I think it is a fun, enjoyable movie, but I definitely have some problems with it, and we will talk about those. But let's start off with what I enjoyed with this movie. And I have to say, probably my favorite thing about this movie is the dynamic between Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson. I thought both of those two actors just had a great dynamic on screen. Now, I think Captain Marvel is their third or maybe even fourth film together at this point, which is pretty crazy. And at this point, I think they should just keep that going because they have a great dynamic and it just looked like they had fun acting together. And I hope to see them in future films, perhaps Captain Marvel 2. I would love to see both of their characters in Captain Marvel 2 together again. Actually, my favorite character in this movie is Talos, played by Ben Mendelsohn. Now, he's really the only character in this movie that really shows any sort of emotion and has really any sort of storyline and arc to him. I just loved his character in this movie, and by the end you really felt for him, and Ben Mendelsohn definitely did a great job playing him, and I'm looking forward to him in future MCU movies, hopefully. Also, another thing I enjoyed about this movie was the 90s nostalgia. Now, I was born in the 90s, so going back in the 90s was definitely a fun time for me. It was definitely part of my enjoyment in this movie, and also this movie is just pretty funny. I just had a fun, enjoyable time with this movie. But now let's talk about with what I did not like about this movie. As much as I enjoyed this movie, I definitely had some problems with it, and probably my biggest problem with this movie is it just lacks any sort of style or uniqueness. This movie doesn't feel like it was directed by anybody. It feels like it was a studio film. It feels like a bland superhero movie, which I know is a pretty harsh complaint with the movie. However, that didn't really take my grade down that much. It's just a bit disappointing because Endgame feels like a Russo brothers movie. Far From Home feels like a John Watts movie. Thor Ragnarok feels like a Taika Waititi movie. And Captain Marvel doesn't feel like it's anybody's movie. And to me, that is definitely a pretty big complaint that I had with the movie. Something else that is a negative about this movie are the fight scenes. There really are no fight scenes. There are a couple, and they are just very bland in my opinion. Like I've been saying, this movie just has no style, and it definitely shows in the fight scenes. There's like one good fight scene in the beginning of the movie that I enjoyed, but besides that, pretty much all of the action and all of the fight scenes are just kind of bland in my opinion. Well, at the end of the day, I still very much enjoyed this movie, and for it to be the worst MCU film of the year is pretty impressive for Marvel. It just goes to show how good both of the other two films are. And speaking of which, let's rank the other two films. Coming in at number 2 is Spider-Man Far From Home. I absolutely love this movie. The fact that this movie is at number 2 is amazing. Now, on a normal year, this would easily be at number one because this movie is just fantastic. I enjoyed every single second of this movie. And now, unlike Captain Marvel, I really have nothing to complain about with this movie. I just enjoyed the hell out of this movie. And a big part of that is because of Jake Gyllenhaal. He is now one of my favorite characters in the MCU ever. I really hope that we see more of his character in the future because I just loved him in this movie. I loved his twist, his backstory, and Jake Gyllenhaal just gave a great performance, but that is no surprise to me because Jake Gyllenhaal is easily one of the best actors ever. And as soon as Jake Gyllenhaal got cast as Mysterio, I was on board all the way because I just absolutely love that man. Another thing I love about this movie is the fact that it takes place minutes after Endgame. It goes into more detail about the snap and what happened to some characters, but it does it in a more jokingly manner. I just love learning more about the blimp and what happened to some characters, and I thought it was all very funny, and I just love the fact that it goes into more detail. And something else I also love is the fact that this movie is pretty much a love letter to Tony Stark and the legacy that he left in Endgame, because Tony Stark is obviously just one of the greatest characters of all time. Robert Downey Jr., he was born to play that role, and Tony Stark died in Endgame. He sacrificed himself to pretty much save everybody, the entire universe. Now that Tony's dead, Peter has to move on and overcome that and become the man that Tony wanted Peter to become. And also, one of my favorite parts about this movie is Peter Parker is not at home. Obviously, it's called Far From Home. He is not in New York anymore. And I enjoyed that. I just love the fact that it's not your typical Spider-Man story. I love how they changed it and made it different from all of the other Spider-Man movies. And it's no surprise that Tom Holland is a great Spider-Man. I mean, Tom Holland is my Spider-Man. I absolutely love him. Unfortunately, though, you guys have heard the news by now. Sony and Marvel have split ways, and Spider-Man will no longer be a part of the MCU. So this movie is pretty much a farewell to Spider-Man in the MCU, which is very sad. I was not expecting that whatsoever. But no matter what, this movie just got me excited for the future of Spider-Man. The way this movie ended was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It ended on a big cliffhanger, and the end credits of this movie are fantastic. Just fantastic. Whether Spider-Man is a part of the MCU or not, I am still very much looking forward to Spider-Man 3. At the end of the day, Spider-Man Far From Home is just a fantastic film. I absolutely loved every single second of this movie. I just recommend it to everybody, and that is why it is coming in at number 2. Obviously, coming in at number 1 is Avengers Endgame. Now, you guys probably guessed this from the very beginning. And not only is this my number 1 MCU film of the year, but this is my number 1 MCU film of all time. I fucking adored this movie from beginning to end. I mean, this is the biggest movie of all time. It is the culmination of 22 other films all coming together in this mega epic blockbuster, and I just enjoyed this movie so much, especially the final hour. It was so good. I can't express that enough. The final hour of this movie is insane. It is nuts, and I enjoyed it. If I have one complaint with this movie, first 2 hours are just not as good as that final hour. Is that really a complaint? No, because I enjoyed the hell out of the first 2 hours as well. This movie is pretty much just a love letter to the MCU itself. It just takes you on the journey throughout the 10 years, going back in time, going back to the different films, going back to different events. And it's pretty much just a love letter to itself. Probably the greatest theater experience I've ever had. It was a day that I will never forget, watching this movie for the first time. Just that excitement that I had just watching this movie for the first time. I will never feel that ever again. No movie will ever do that for me ever again. In 20 years from now, I cannot wait to show my children this movie. How can I talk about this movie without talking about the Mad Titan himself, Thanos? You know a villain is good when you are sad that he dies. Because honestly, when Thanos was dying in this movie, technically he died twice. But when you see him fading away, honestly, I felt a little sad just because it's been 10 years and they have been building up to this character and I have spent all of this time with him. So it's a bit sad to see him go. But man, did Josh Brolin leave a legacy with this character. I absolutely love Thanos. He is the greatest villain of all time, and I will honestly miss him in the MCU. You know a movie is good when you can't even pick your favorite moment in a movie, because this movie is literally filled with my favorite moments. There are moments in here that I was erupting with cheer. There are moments in here that I was crying. There are moments in here that I was laughing. It will make you laugh, cry, and cheer all within minutes of each other, and that is why I love this movie. It reminds me of why I love going to the movies. This is an instant classic. It is a movie that will be remembered for decades and possibly even centuries to come, and I just adored every single second of this movie. 22 films all coming together in this one movie to pull off the impossible, and the Russo brothers did that. And the Russo brothers, they deserve all of the credit for this movie. What they pulled off with this movie and Infinity War, both of them combined, just one epic mega story. And the Russo brothers and also Kevin Feige, what he pulled off over the 22 years with this movie. Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers are God. They are literally God. And this movie is amazing. I could talk about how much I love this movie for literally years, but I don't want this video to be that long, so I'm going to end it here. I literally have no complaints with Endgame. It's just a phenomenal movie. Anyways, guys, that is my ranking of the 3 MCU films of the year. Captain Marvel, Spider-Man Far From Home, and then Avengers Endgame at number 1. So anyways, guys, let me know how you would rank these movies down below. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. And if this is your first ever video of mine and you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate every single one of you guys. But anyways, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.